very good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Vantage Point with me, Zulfikar, and my guest, Dr. Dayan Jatilaka. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Zulfik, and congratulations on your award.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think congratulations goes to the entire team for this award. Well, Doctor, we are coming on this program right after a complete cabinet reshuffle has taken place, or they term it as a complete cabinet reshuffle.
Right.
But before we get into that, before this program, I spoke to a couple of people outside, and what they were saying is, if it's a cabinet reshuffle, we need to see some new faces. But it seems like, just changing the heads of the people inside cabinet. How would you comment on that, Doctor?
Well, from what I've been told is a list of names, doesn't look like much. It was supposed to be a scientific cabinet reshuffle. It's more science fiction to me. What's new? I'm glad that Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa has been put in charge of higher education. Now that is one good appointment. The rest of it, there's no big deal. It's the same old, same old. Okay, Field Marshal Fonseca has been given wildlife. I suppose there's some logic there. And Duminda Dissanayake is back with disaster management, which again is quite logical, but given what has happened with the SLFP. But I don't see any reason for hope at all. There's nothing new, no people with new ideas or proven success stories being given important portfolios, so and so is in charge now. It's the same thing. I can't tell the difference except for Vijayadasa. I would have thought that Sajit would have got Samurdi and,
something to go in line with
something, for the upliftment of the people. No. I would have thought that maybe Sarat Amarugama would have been the foreign minister. Or, Mahinda Samarasinghe, the foreign minister. None of that. It's the same old thing. It's stale bread. And what's the big deal? It's stale bread with a little fresh butter on it.
Doctor, stale bread with a little fresh butter on it. Can this be viewed as some sort of scheme to, change the mindset of the people after, especially the United National Party and the SLFP both suffering a drastic defeat at the local government elections?
How are the people going to change their mind when they see this? They're going to yawn. What's the big deal? You can't change the people's minds. You can change the people's minds if you bring in some popular or proven successors and give them something important. That's a signal of a change of direction. Like I said, if Sajit had been given an enlarged area, now in Dissanayake, and in whatever is left of the SLFP that is staying in government, you have some able, experienced people. I would have thought that certainly foreign affairs would have gone either to Amarugama or to Mahinda Samarasinghe. Now, that would have meant something. A small uptick in the stock market. But you watch how the stock market reacts. You watch the investor confidence in the various indices. I don't think there will be any elation over this. I don't think this is going to give any bounce to the markets.
Doctor, from what you're saying, I feel like the rupee is going to slump even further.
Well, that's a little difficult to do, but given this government and the plunge of the rupee, the lowest ever historically, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I mean, nothing bad will surprise me. Something good will surprise me. Like I said, I'm happy that Vijayadasa is in charge of education, higher education.
Doctor, speaking of the cabinet reshuffle, now we also heard about we also saw about the restructuring of the United National Party, which was a complete surprise.
Of course.
How about that, Doctor? How would you see this restructuring of the UNP?
Well, what I see is whichever channel I turn to for my news in the night, I see disaffected UNP MPs and other elected representatives voicing their disaffection on camera. That's what I see. I mean, Zulfi, I have not seen the United National Party in this bad a shape ever. I have not seen it as unelectable as it is now. And prediction is a mug's game, especially when you're a political analyst and commentator, and if you say something and you get it wrong, that affects your reputation. But I'm going to go out on a limb because, you know, I did say that the Porto will beat the UNP and the SLFP,
Yes.
and that proved right. So I'm going out on a limb here, but I do want to say that I think that if the UNP remains under the present leadership, and there's no sign of it changing, there is no sign, that at the next election, the next national election, the UNP will go down to its worst ever defeat in its electoral history since 1947. It will, the next national election, I don't mean the provincial election, they'll lose at the provincial election if they dare to have one, and right now it looks like they've got their track shoes on, they're running away from the, not running for office, they're running away from the election, from office. But eventually an election is going to catch up with them, and we know that the Supreme Court has ruled that the presidential election has to be held before da-da-da-da-da, so we know it's just the 17 months to go. Whatever the national election is, presidential or parliamentary, I predict, and as I said, I'm risking my reputation here, I predict that the UNP will go down to its lowest percentage in its history if it runs under the present leadership. I mean, I don't know if the leadership changes tomorrow morning, then what I said does not apply. But if things remain as they are at the top, because that's where the problem is, the UNP is going to suffer its worst electoral defeat ever.
Doctor, speaking on that same line, now before the motion of no confidence, we had UNP parliamentarians coming out and saying, look, the party leader promised us reforms in the party, and therefore we are going to defeat the motion of no confidence. And after the restructuring of the party took place, the very MPs who made those statements, not in public, but at various forums, say, this is not what we want.
No, in public, Ajit P. Pereira
yes, people
have
like
been very vociferous.
But the others, in various other forums, they come and say, look, this is not what we want. This is not what we hoped for. So there seems to be a quite disappointment among the UNP parliamentarians there.
There is, and I don't see how they're going to mobilize for an election. I mean, look at the May Day rally that's coming up. I belong to a generation that remembers UNP May Day rallies in government, but also in opposition, but now they're in government, so we have to judge them by what they used to do when they were in government. They used to fill golf place, they used to march, the UNP used to march and fill Golface Green. Today, in Sri Lankan politics, there's only one guy who can fill Golface Green, and that's Mahinda Rajapaksa, and he proved it last year. And that was a governmental miscalculation. They gave them Golface Green thinking that A, they couldn't fill it, and B, even if they did fill it, that would mean the SLFP would split in two and the UNP would win the election, the local government election. That was those were the stakes. Well, they filled the Porto filled the Golface Green. They ran for the elections, and they didn't just split the SLFP. They beat both the SLFP and the UNP. So the UNP can't even think strategically. But right now, on May Day, the UNP, which used to fill Golface Green, and it used to go on till late night, is having its May Day on the 7th at the Sugatadasa Indoor Stadium. And if you go back to your archives, you will find that your guest today, i.e. me, I've had a May Day in the Sugatadasa Indoor Stadium when I was the executive director of the Premadasa Center in 1997, and Mr. Sirisena Kure was jailed unfairly because the government had to pay costs by Chandrika's government, and I had to, the Premadasa Center had to fill in, and of course we didn't fill Sugatadasa Stadium to capacity, but that was our venue. And now the mighty United National Party, now ours was a civil society organization under a hostile Chandrika administration. But the UNP, which is the preeminent party in government, is confining its May Day, it's scrapped its march, and it's confining May Day to the Sugatadasa Indoor Stadium. Now, you know, it's pathetic.
That is some interesting thoughts there about the UNP and the Sugatadasa Stadium, whereas you yourself held a May Day.
Yeah, I spoke. I've addressed.
We continue this discussion on the UNP and several other political discussions right after this short commercial break. We were discussing about the May Day rally of the United National Party, the reforms of the UNP, and also the cabinet reshuffle that took place on Tuesday. Now, Doctor, before we proceed with the program, I wish to ask you one specific question.
Okay.
We have the UNP, we have the SLFP, we have the Pohotua, we have the JAP, and all the other parties in Parliament. And 225 MPs in Parliament. The cost, the people are paying for these MPs.
Okay.
And then in local government, from 4,000 we went to 9,000. Again, the cost by the people. And now we have the depreciation of the rupee, record depreciation of the rupee. In this backdrop, let's assume that you were in governance and there was a depreciation in rupee. What measures would you take to
Oh my God, Zulfi, that's a very good question. I mean, seriously, any government anywhere in the world, and certainly the Sri Lankan governments I worked with two. President Premadasa, whose 25th death anniversary falls today, the day that we record, and President Rajapaksa, two very strong, successful presidents. I've been privileged to work closely with them. They would have immediately called a conference, given a tongue lashing to whoever was managing the economy. It would not have been pretty. And you can ask people who worked with them both, as I have. Ask Dr. P.B. Jayasundara what would have happened. He worked with both these presidents. And then they would have been given strict instructions that you have to stabilize the rupee. You have to defend the rupee. That's what would have happened. Instead, the only thing I saw was, I saw two things. Both people are my friends. One is a better friend than the other, friendly acquaintance. My friend is Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, and Indrajit put in a performance that certainly would not have been tolerated either by Premadasa or Mahinda. He said, well, you know, we can defend this if worst comes to the worst, if it goes below this, but we are not going to do that now. And it was a very lukewarm, lackluster performance.
If not now, but then when?
Exactly. I think that was Reagan's line. If not us, who? If not now, when?
Yes.
So, well, it's certainly not going to be these guys. And then my friendly acquaintance, Dr. Harsha De Silva, actually aggressively defends not the rupee, but the policy of allowing it to sink. I think it's in the dated textbooks that he's read. Or it's just that the IMF has given these guys orders and Mangala has agreed, and that's what they're implementing. That's my suspicion, that they've been told to let the rupee sink to a certain rate, i.e. devalue. This is a devaluation.
But wouldn't it be harmful to the economy, Doctor?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, Zulfikar, look at it's not just the rupee. The central bank has just confirmed the earlier report of the Department of Census and Statistics that the economic growth rate that we are experiencing is the lowest in 16 years. 16 years takes you back to the worst days of the war.
Yes.
The worst days of the war and the best days of the Ranil Wickremesinghe prime ministership of the last time.
I see.
So, you know, the man is consistent. Whenever he is prime minister, the economic growth rate drops. So it was 16 years ago that we were last this badly off. And then you have the rupee, which has never been lower, has never sunk lower than this before. Then you have the stock market, which is flatlining. It was the best performing stock market. It was performing very well under President Premadasa, but if that's ancient history, it was performing very well after the war.
We saw investors coming in.
So now it's flatlining. When you take those three, I mean, there are other indicators I can talk about, but let's just take these three, the rupee, the economic growth rate, and the stock market. This is an economy that is in terminal crisis. And these guys are not doing anything. There should be an emergency meeting as to what to do with the economic crisis. But the problem is that all of this is in accordance with and caused by the shared economic philosophy and policies of Prime Minister Wickremesinghe and Finance Minister Samaravira. Together with the IMF, and that's why they're allowing this. And you know, look, I travel by taxi. I go to places, I watch movies, people come and talk to me because they recognize me from the television and the newspapers. You must have this experience. And since I'm older than you, I've been around for longer, I've served overseas and so on, so more people come and probably talk to me. It's possible. And, you know, a cab driver refused to take, my bill was 320. He said, no, just give me 300. I mean, he didn't want the 20 bucks. And he says, sir, please help get rid of this government. We watch you, we read you, please do something, save us, help save us. I mean, he knows I'm not running for office.
Exactly.
And the only thing he could show his appreciation by is refusing to take the 20 bucks I owed him. I mean, this kind of thing happens to me several times a day. People are suffering, they're desperate. They're frustrated and they're angry. And I don't know what's going to happen.
That's very true, Doctor. Many of the people are currently facing severe inconveniences in all sectors in the country. And we'll talk more on that and on North Korea and South Korea, a historical moment over there, right after this short commercial break.
Welcome to Legends of Music on TV1 with Srilal Hangam and myself.
Because she was a big star and she was on this not so very good contract.
I see. So, what happened next? The Who are famous for destroying their instruments.
Also destructive.
We're celebrating Valentine's like twice in this
That's
year.
more brown than red.
Wow.
Legends of Music, Irida, සවස 2:30ට.
Welcome back to Vantage Point. Dr. Dayan, we cut short the discussion on the IMF. Let me come to the point. Can we as a country, and can this government, as the body of governance, dance to the tunes of the IMF?
Well, I mean, you can deal with the IMF, but you must have your national interests at heart. And it's stupid to do what these people are doing. Now, I remember a very interesting economist, a Sri Lankan born economist, whose father was, I think, the Postmaster General. This is Professor Howard Nicholas.
Okay.
He is a professor at the University of Rotterdam. He travels to China and Vietnam and lectures and so on. And he was brought over here last year for a guest lecture, a whole day discussion. I was also on a panel. And he told his audience, Kabir was there. Kabir had been one of his pupils when he taught at Columbia University. Kabir Hashim was there. And Professor Howard Nicholas said, look, don't believe the stuff they teach you in economics when you attend Western universities, because that's not what they practice as economic policy in their own countries. They'll tell you not to defend your currency, they defend theirs. They'll tell you not to have tariff barriers, they have tariff barriers. So try to learn from what they do, not from what they tell you to do and what they say. Now, the guys managing our economy go by what they're told by the West rather than what the West does in its own interest. So they say, let the rupee float even if it sinks. These guys let it float even if it sinks. And who suffers? The people suffer. So it has a knock-on effect because your consumer demand is going to shrink because people don't have enough purchasing power. If they don't have purchasing power and consumer demand shrinks, then who are you producing for? Your market is shrinking. So it affects not just the have-nots, it affects the haves as well.
So, Doctor,
I forgot. The taxes. So, on top of the rupee that's sinking and the economic growth rate that's hitting the floor and the stock market that's already in the basement, you knock him on the head with heavy taxes. What a time to do that. I mean, it's not like the economy is prospering and people are making super profits and it's time to skim a little bit off the top in order to help your social welfare safety net. I mean, these taxes will add to the sense of suffocation. There's a sense of, what I get from society is a sense of claustrophobia. I think society is feeling claustrophobic under this government.
And Doctor, in the same line of discussion, is Sri Lanka going to be a failed state?
Well, it's certainly a failed government, and it would have been a failed state, except there's a silver lining. National elections are in 17 months. According to Supreme Court verdict, there's nothing that can be done about that, unless you abolish the presidency or something, and I don't think that's going to happen either, or that's going to work either. The JVP's 20th Amendment, I see too much flack. I don't think it's going to work.
Too much all talk.
Yeah, no. I mean, if it comes to a referendum, the people will vote against it. They'll vote against anything that comes from that 2015 January Yahapalana Hansaya coalition. They'll just
be
say
it good
no.
or bad.
Be good or bad. It's going to be a kind of a Brexit thing. They're going to vote against it. So, elections latest late next year. Mahinda Rajapaksa used to say, only 2 more Vesak Poyas. I think I told this story because I was there on the platform one day and he said, Tava Poya dek. I mean, only 2 more Poyas, then somebody whispers, only 2 more Vesak Poyas. I mean, he was like getting ahead of himself, only 2 more Poyas. So now it's 1 more Vesak Poya. Because if you go by this government's reckoning, Vesak is ending.
Exactly.
Or has ended. So there's 1 more Vesak Poya and 1 more Alut Aurudu, Sinhala Hindu New Year, to go max before the people get to vote. And then their misery can end. So that's the only good news. The rest of it is bad. If not for those elections coming up, we would wind up a failed state.
So Sri Lankan politics is going to reach very, 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 and I emphasize one more very interesting period as we draw closer to national elections and then provincial council elections and then finally the presidential election. So we'll have to see what's going to happen and what the mindset of the people is going to be with regard to Sri Lankan politics, be it the opposition or the government. What do the people want? Now, before we wrap up this program, there's one more interesting thing that we really must talk about. That is North Korea and South Korea, a historic handshake at the demilitarized zone. Doctor, I think this would pave the way for global denuclearization?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it's such a wonderful thing, Zofi. It's so wonderful to feel-good factor. Because you don't have much good news internationally. I mean, you've got these new anonymous attacks on Syria. Some bases have been hit.
Indeed.
Nobody's claimed responsibility. Some Iranian personnel and advisors have died. Iran has won. So, that whole place could blow up. Because the Israelis are trying to draw the Iranians into a war with the United States. But here, these 2 leaders, I mean, this guy we thought was some kind of crazy crank.
Who would possibly one day
Kim
bomb
Jong-un,
and nuke the US.
I mean, that guy turned out to be one smart cookie, and then the South Korean president, liberal, progressive, and it was so wonderful to see them see Kim crossing and inviting Moon to cross back, and they crossed back, and then, this whole program, there was a concert. It was so wonderful. But I'm sorry to sound negative, but I have to draw your attention and the attention of our audience to a strange anomaly. The whole of Asia was happy pretty much. The Japanese maybe not so much. Most of the people of the world, most of humanity was happy. Even Trump was happy when he tweeted. I don't know what he really thinks, but he was happy. Okay. Now there's one place where the government, or at least a newspaper belonging to the government, was not happy and was very negative about this wonderful thing we saw. And that was right here in Sri Lanka. The official newspaper of the government of Sri Lanka, the Daily News, of which my father was one of the more distinguished editors, and that's why I'm very shocked at what I read, on the 30th of April, carried a full-page article, and the only article on the subject, not like it was a debate, a full-page article by a guy called Michael Green, who I don't know, and they hadn't said who on earth Michael Green was, attacking this historic handshake and the walkthrough, saying this is a Pyongyang trap, only Pyongyang benefits from this, watch out, it's not going to work, there's an elephant in the room. I mean, this is a state-owned newspaper. This is the flagship of the Sri Lankan government in terms of newspapers, the Daily News. Who got that article published? No self-respecting editor, and as the son of an editor, not to mention being a former diplomat myself, knowing Sri Lankan foreign policy, no editor should have allowed an attack on that particular event to be published in the Ceylon Daily News. If there were two views, then we should have known who on earth Michael Green was. And this is a foreigner. This is not a Sri Lankan. We don't know who he is. And there should have been another point of view opposing that, so two views. But this is a state newspaper. And to have some unknown guy called Michael Green trashing this in a full-page article in the Ceylon Daily News tells us that there's something rotten about this government when Asia and the rest of the world are pleased and are encouraging this wonderful piece of news to attack it in this way in a state newspaper. I mean, is this, I suspect that this is because the Minister of Mass Media probably holds these views. I don't know who Michael Green is, where this article came from, why the editor published it, and whether the rest of government hasn't seen it. But that, to me, indicates the rot that has set in. This country, this government is headed in a crazy direction. And I mean, it's to the right of Trump. I mean, this is crazy. I don't know who they represent. Whether they represent John Bolton or, you know, what's going on here, Zulfik? I pride myself on usually knowing what's going on. I don't know. Somebody's gone gaga.
A very interesting question there, Doctor. And the question among everyone right now, what's going on? We leave that question to you. What's going on and what's going to happen? We'll just have to wait and see as the days progress. That's it from us at Vantage Point. Thank you very much for joining us and have a wonderful evening.